She was lost on the road, aimless, carrying in her arms the only thing she had left in the world, when a black car pulled up beside her and a man asked the most unexpected question she had ever heard in her life. Can you imagine being so desperate, so pushed to the brink, that you would agree to marry a complete stranger just to save your daughter from starvation? But this story actually happened in May of 1958, deep in the countryside, on a dirt road between the village of St. Michael's Crossing and the town of Diamond Creek. Before we continue this narrative, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and hit that like button down below, because the ending of this story is going to surprise you in ways you never imagined. What this millionaire widower offered this desperate young mother changed not only her and her daughter's destiny, but also revealed a pain so deep within him that no one in the region even suspected. And tell me in the comments what city you're watching this story from. I love knowing where these narratives travel and whose hearts they touch. The afternoon of May 14th, 1958, fell heavy and suffocating over the red dirt road that cut through the countryside like an old scar on the earth's parched skin. The sun was still burning mercilessly at 4 o'clock, turning the air into something dense and hot that stung the lungs with every breath. Clouds of dust rose with every step, sticking to sweaty skin, getting into eyes, drying out mouths that were already parched. The smell was of dry earth, of grass scorched by the relentless sun, of stagnant air with no relief from a breeze. Beatrice Carson walked slowly along the shoulder of the road, dragging her bare feet through the scalding dust. Every step cost a monumental effort she barely had the strength to make. In her trembling arms, weary to the bone, she held Alice, her 2-year and 4-month-old daughter, who slept with her little blonde head resting on her mother's sweaty shoulder. The girl was too light, Beatrice thought, with a painful tightness in her chest that stole what little air she could manage to draw in. Too light, because for 3.5 days they had eaten only scraps found in trash cans behind general stores in the tiny hamlets they passed. Too light, because hunger was consuming that small, fragile body, turning once rosy cheeks into pale, hollow faces, dimming the shine of clear blue eyes that used to reflect childish joy. Beatrice was a full 23 years old, but the mirror in the last store where she managed to wash her face showed a woman who looked 10 years older. Her face was sunburnt, skin peeling on her cheekbones and nose, revealing raw pink layers underneath. Her lips were cracked, bleeding at the corners, stinging with every movement. Her deep-set brown eyes showed dark circles of exhaustion that no amount of sleep would relieve. The light blue cotton dress that had once been beautiful, a birthday gift from her mother 4 years ago when things were still normal, was now unrecognizable. Dirty with red dust that had penetrated the fibers of the fabric, torn at the hem where she had tripped over sharp stones, stained with sweat and the accumulated grime of days of walking, a hole in the left shoulder where a tree branch had snagged the fabric when she slept, leaning against a trunk. Her light brown hair, which used to fall in soft waves over her shoulders, was now tangled in impossible knots, full of dry leaves and twigs, plastered with sweat to the nape of her neck and temples. Her hands were filthy, nails broken with dirt underneath, fresh calluses forming on her palms from holding Alice for mile after mile without rest. Her bare feet were bleeding. Not dramatic cuts, but dozens of small wounds, blisters that had burst into raw flesh, cracks in her hardened heels, tiny thorns buried in the soles that she had neither the time nor the energy to remove. But even devastated by fatigue, even on the verge of total collapse, there was still something in Beatrice's eyes that hadn't died, an iron determination, stubborn, coming from a deep place inside her where the most primitive and powerful maternal instinct resided. As long as there was a thread of hope, as long as there was one more step she could take, she would continue, because stopping meant giving up. And giving up meant sitting on the side of that road and watching Alice die of hunger in her arms. And that was impossible, unacceptable, unthinkable. She would die walking before letting that happen. Beatrice didn't know exactly where she was going. The geography around her was unfamiliar. The names of the villages she passed meant nothing to her. She just followed the main road that someone in one of the hamlets said led to Diamond Creek. There, they had said, was an orphanage run by the Sisters of Charity that might take Alice in. The idea of separating from her daughter shattered Beatrice's heart into pieces so small she thought she could never put them back together. But watching Alice wither away from hunger, seeing the light fade from those little eyes, seeing the suffering of an innocent child who depended completely on her, that seemed an even worse fate. At least at the orphanage, Alice would have food. She would have a clean bed. She would have nuns who would care for her, teach her, protect her, even if it was without her mother. Even if Beatrice had to live the rest of her life with a hole in her chest where Alice was supposed to be. 3 months and 2 weeks ago, Beatrice's life was completely different. It wasn't a life of wealth or luxury, but it was a dignified, honest life with a future ahead. She lived with Alice in a small but clean room at the back of Mrs. Higgins's house, a kind widow who rented the room for a fair price in the village of Stonybrook, about 60 miles south of there, near the state line. The room had only a narrow double bed where Beatrice and Alice slept snuggled together, an old trunk where they kept their few clothes, a small table with a kerosene lamp, a crucifix on the wall that had belonged to Beatrice's grandmother, and a small window overlooking the backyard where chickens scratched and an ancient mulberry tree bore sweet fruit. Beatrice worked as a seamstress. She had learned the trade from her own mother when she was a girl. She had skilled hands and an eye for detail. She sewed dresses for the young ladies of the village who went to dances on Sundays, mended torn clothes for the workers from the nearby farms, embroidered delicate trousseaux for brides, made tiny clothes for newborn babies. She earned little, but it was enough. She paid the rent of $3 a month to Mrs. Higgins. She bought rice, beans, cornmeal, eggs from the neighbors' chickens, fresh milk that the milkman delivered every morning in a glass bottle. She even managed to save a few coins in a jar hidden under the bed, dreaming that one day she would save enough to rent her own house, maybe buy a sewing machine better than the old, temperamental one she used. Alice had 2 happy years until then. She played with other children in the square in front of the church, ran after the chickens in the backyard, making them cluck indignantly, ate mulberries until her mouth was purple, slept peacefully every night, lulled by the lullabies Beatrice sang in a soft voice. The people of the village greeted Beatrice on the street. The ladies ordered work. The priest smiled when he saw them at Sunday Mass. The shopkeepers sold on credit when money was tight at the end of the month. It wasn't an easy life, but it was a good life. Beatrice had dignity, she had work, she had a healthy and happy daughter, she had hope for the future. But everything fell apart on a sunny afternoon in February of 1958, when Beatrice looked out the window of her little room and saw an elegant car stop in front of the main church. It was a brand new Cadillac, shiny black paint gleaming in the sun, white wool tires, polished chrome. The kind of car only very rich people owned. Beatrice was finishing the hem of a wedding dress, a pincushion on her wrist, a silver thimble on her middle finger, when she saw a man get out of the car. He wore a light beige linen suit, a silk vest, a striped tie, a wide-brimmed Panama hat, and polished leather boots that must have cost more than 3 months of Beatrice's rent. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with the upright posture of someone who had never worked hunched over in the fields. And when he took off his hat to greet the priest who had come out of the church, Beatrice felt the world stop completely. It was Robert Miller, Alice's father. The man who had sworn eternal love to Beatrice 4 years ago, who had promised to marry her when they saved enough money, who disappeared completely when she told him with a trembling, hopeful voice that she was pregnant. Beatrice dropped the dress, pressed her hand against her mouth to stifle the scream that wanted to come out, felt her legs go weak and had to sit on the bed before she fell. Alice, who was playing with a rag doll on the floor, looked at her mother without understanding. "Mommy sick?" the little girl asked with innocent concern. Beatrice shook her head, unable to speak, unable to take her eyes off the window. Robert was talking animatedly with the priest, gesturing, laughing. And beside him, a young woman got out of the car, no more than 20 years old, wearing a complete silk traveling outfit in pink with white lace details, a hat adorned with fabric flowers, lace gloves up to her elbows. She was conventionally pretty, with a round, rosy face, blonde hair arranged in elaborate curls, a tiny waist accentuated by a corset, and she wore a gold wedding band gleaming on her left finger. Beatrice found out later, through Mrs. Margaret, who sold vegetables at the market and knew everything that happened within a 10-mile radius, that Robert had married 6 months ago. His wife was Cecilia, the daughter of Colonel Armstrong of Diamond Creek, owner of 3 enormous cattle and coffee plantations. The wedding had been a grand celebration that mobilized the entire region. Robert had gotten a job as the administrator of one of his father-in-law's farms, earning a generous salary, living in a big house, driving a fine car, frequenting the balls and dinners of rural high society. He had completely forgotten the humble girl he left behind, pregnant and alone. Beatrice wanted nothing from him. She didn't want explanations he would never give. She didn't want fake apologies. She didn't want money stained with guilt and shame. She didn't want revenge or confrontation. She just wanted him to stay away, to never find out where she and Alice lived, to never interfere in their lives. Beatrice would raise Alice alone with pride and love, and the girl would grow up strong and happy without needing a cowardly father who had abandoned them. But fate has a cruel sense of humor. Robert saw Beatrice. It was 3 days later, when Beatrice needed to go to the general store to buy thread to finish the trousseau she was sewing. Alice walked beside her, holding her mother's hand, chattering about a little bird she had seen in the yard. Beatrice entered the dark, cool store, greeted Mr. Anthony the shopkeeper, asked for 3 spools of white thread and 1 of navy blue. And when she turned to leave, she bumped into a man who was entering. It was Robert. The two stood paralyzed, staring at each other in a tense silence that seemed to last for eternities. "Beatrice," Robert said finally, his voice deeper than she remembered, the voice of a man who had grown fat and prosperous. Beatrice lifted her chin, looked directly into his eyes with a dignity that wouldn't let him see fear or pain. "Robert," she replied with an icy, controlled voice. His eyes drifted down to Alice, who was hiding behind her mother's skirts, curious but shy with the stranger. Robert turned pale as if he had seen a ghost. "The girl," he began with a strangled voice. "She is—" Beatrice interrupted sharply. "She is none of your business, never was, never will be." But Robert stared at Alice as if he were doing the math. The girl had light blonde hair identical to his, clear blue eyes that he saw in the mirror every morning, the shape of the face, the way her nose turned up a little at the tip. There was no denying she was his daughter. "How old?" he wanted to know with a trembling voice. "2," Beatrice replied, holding Alice against her legs. Robert ran a hand over his face, a gesture Beatrice remembered well, one he made when he was nervous or scared. "I didn't know," he began. "You knew," Beatrice cut him off, her voice low but hard as tempered steel. "I told you, you ran away." Robert looked around, checking if anyone was listening. Mr. Anthony pretended to organize sardine cans, but was obviously paying attention to every word. "Beatrice, we need to talk," Robert said with false urgency. "About what?" she retorted. "About how you abandoned me pregnant? About how you married a rich woman and forgot I existed?" About how you're a coward who never took responsibility. We have nothing to talk about, Robert. You made your choices. I made mine. Stay away from me and my daughter." She brushed past him with firm steps, left the store holding Alice by the hand, and went back to the little room with her heart beating uncontrollably in her chest. She hoped that was the end of it. She hoped Robert would go back to his rich, comfortable life and forget the uncomfortable encounter. But 2 weeks later, on a Saturday morning, when Beatrice was returning from the market with Alice and a small basket of vegetables, she found 4 people waiting in front of her room. It was her parents and her 2 older brothers. Beatrice felt her stomach twist into tight knots that rose up her throat, bringing the taste of bile. Mr. Oliver Carson, her father, was a 52-year-old man, tall and thin, his face marked by the sun from a lifetime of working on other people's farms, calloused hands, a perpetually severe expression. He wore the same clothes he always wore, worn but clean denim trousers, a plaid shirt patched at the elbows, a straw hat with a frayed brim. But what dominated him was an inflexible moral rigidity that allowed for no deviations or forgiveness. Beside him, Mrs. Lucille, Beatrice's mother, 50 years old, looking like 70, shrunk by the weight of a hard life and a domineering husband, eyes downcast, hands clasped nervously in front of her body. Her brothers, Sebastian, 29, and Alphonse, 27, looked like less worn copies of their father, same hard expression, same judgment in their eyes. "Beatrice," Mr. Oliver called with a voice that cut like a sharp razor, "I need to speak with you." Beatrice squeezed Alice's hand, feeling the girl shrink back, frightened by the tone of the grandfather she had never known. "Speak, then," Beatrice replied, keeping her voice steady despite the cold fear spreading through her chest. "Not here," Mr. Oliver ordered. "Inside, it's family business." Beatrice hesitated, then opened the door to the little room. They entered the tiny space which seemed to shrink even more with 5 adults and a child squeezed inside. Alice began to whimper, scared, and Beatrice picked her up, holding her tight, an instinctive protective gesture of a mother sensing danger. Mr. Oliver got straight to the point, without preamble, without kindness. "Robert Miller came to find me," he said, looking at Beatrice with eyes hard as stones. "He told me you have his daughter, that you lay with him without marriage, that you got pregnant, that you hid this from me and your mother all this time." Beatrice felt rage explode inside her. "I didn't hide anything," she replied, her voice trembling with contained fury. "I told you I was pregnant. You kicked me out of the house. You said I was a disgrace to the family, that you never wanted to see me again." Mr. Oliver turned red. "And what did you expect?" he shouted, slamming his heavy hand on the small table, which shook under the impact. "That I accept a dishonored daughter, pregnant by a man who didn't even want to marry her? You shamed this family's name, Beatrice, and now the whole village will know. Robert is spreading the story, saying you seduced him, that you schemed to get pregnant thinking he would marry you, that when he refused, you slandered him." The words were lies so absurd that Beatrice was speechless for a moment. "It was Robert who pursued me," she managed to say finally, with a voice strangled by indignation. "It was he who swore eternal love. It was he who promised marriage. And it was he who ran when he found out about the pregnancy. I never schemed anything. I never lied." Mrs. Lucille cried softly, wiping tears with the corner of her apron, but said nothing in her daughter's defense. "She never did." Mr. Oliver continued, implacable. "It doesn't matter what the truth is," he declared with calculated coldness. "What matters is that now everyone knows, and our family's reputation is destroyed because of you. People are talking, saying the Carsons raised a tramp for a daughter, that we are a family without morals, without honor." Beatrice felt tears sting but refused to let them fall. "And what do you want me to do?" she asked with a low, dangerous voice. Mr. Oliver took a step forward, eyes flashing. I want you to disappear. Take this bastard and leave this village. Never use the Carson name again. Never tell anyone again that you are my daughter. You are no longer part of this family. You are dead to us." "Mom," Beatrice appealed, looking at Mrs. Lucille with desperation rising in her chest. "Say something. Defend your daughter." But Mrs. Lucille just shook her head, tears streaming, mouth pressed into a thin line, a silence that hurt more than words. Her brothers looked at the floor, ashamed perhaps, but also silent, also complicit. "You have until noon tomorrow to leave the village," said Mr. Oliver with absolute finality. "If I see you after that, it will be worse, much worse." They left the room, leaving a silence heavy as a tombstone. Beatrice stood in the middle of the room, holding Alice, who was crying in fear, feeling the world completely crumble around her. Mrs. Higgins appeared half an hour later, her expression sad and embarrassed. "My child," she began with a voice full of genuine pity, "I heard what your father said, and I am so sorry, I truly am. But I can't rent you the room anymore. My husband won't allow it. People will speak ill of me. They'll say I harbor a loose woman. They'll stop greeting me at church. I have my own reputation to protect. You understand, don't you?" Beatrice understood. She understood that she was completely alone. In 24 hours she lost everything: family who rejected her, home that evicted her, reputation that was destroyed by the lies of a cowardly man protecting his own image. Clients began cancelling orders before the sun even set. Mrs. Margaret came to pick up the trousseau she had ordered, saying with fake excuses that she decided to make it herself. Mrs. Theodore sent a message through her son that she didn't need the dress Beatrice was sewing anymore. The doors closed one by one, fast as dominoes falling. The next day before dawn, Beatrice gathered the few things they owned. 3 dresses for her, 2 outfits for Alice, a hairbrush with missing bristles, a half-used bar of soap, a wooden comb, the rag doll she had sewn herself for Alice, her grandmother's crucifix. Everything fit into a small cloth bundle, tied with twine. She took the 7 coins she had saved in the jar, hid them in a pocket sewn inside her dress. She dressed Alice, still sleepy, in the least worn outfit, put on the worn but still intact shoes the girl had, tied her own shawl around her shoulders, and she left the village of Stonybrook, carrying Alice in her arms and the bundle on her back, walking down the dusty road as the sun rose, dyeing the sky pink and orange. She didn't look back. There was nothing to see but ashes of what her life had been. The first days were the worst. Beatrice tried to find work in the small hamlets she passed. She knocked on doors offering sewing services, offered to wash clothes, clean houses, cook, anything. But the same thing always happened. People looked at her, young, alone, with a small child, no husband, no family, no references, and made the worst assumptions. "A decent woman doesn't walk the roads alone," the judgmental look said. "Must be a prostitute, must be a thief, must be a fugitive from a crime." The doors closed before she finished offering to work. The money ran out on the 4th day. Beatrice bought bread and milk at a general store, gave almost all of it to Alice, ate just enough not to faint. The next night they slept under a wooden bridge over a dry creek, using the bundle as a pillow, the shawl as a shared blanket. Alice cried in fear of the night noises, the crickets chirping loudly, the wind moaning between the bridge planks. Beatrice sang softly, rocked her daughter, feigned a courage she didn't feel. On the 6th day they began to truly starve. Beatrice found crabapples fallen on the ground in an abandoned orchard, washed them in the murky water of a stream, gave them to Alice. She ate 2 herself, feeling her stomach churn with the sour, half-rotten fruit. The next night they got lucky. An elderly couple living in an isolated little house took pity and gave them thin vegetable soup and a piece of cornbread. Beatrice thanked them with tears in her eyes, ate slowly, savouring every spoonful as if it were a banquet. But hunger always returned, relentless, constant. Alice began to visibly wither. Her cheeks lost their baby fat, her arms and legs became too thin, her gaze lost its shine. She complained less, cried less, as if she didn't even have the energy to express discomfort, and that frightened Beatrice more than the crying. A child too quiet is a sick child, a child giving up. It was like this, after 3.5 days of walking, 9 days since they left Stony Brook, almost at the absolute limit of human endurance, that Beatrice found herself that May afternoon, walking down the road that led to Diamond Creek. Her legs trembled with every step. Her vision blurred and cleared in waves that matched her weak and irregular pulse. The world spun occasionally, forcing her to stop, breathe deep, wait for it to pass. Alice was too limp in her arms, breathing shallow, skin too hot or too cold. Beatrice could no longer tell properly. She tripped over a large rock in the middle of the road. She almost fell, managed to balance herself at the last second, but the effort cost her last reserves of energy. Her legs simply didn't obey anymore. Beatrice stumbled to the side of the road, where a dry, twisted tree offered meager shade, sat leaning her back against the rough trunk that scratched through the thin fabric of her dress. Alice woke up a little, opened her small eyes that looked too big in her thin little face. "Mama," the little girl whispered, with a tiny voice that broke Beatrice's heart into more pieces than she thought possible. "Thirsty." Beatrice looked around desperately, but there was no water, there was nothing. The empty canteen she had found thrown on the road 2 days ago hung useless on her shoulder. Her own mouth was too dry to produce saliva. "We'll find water soon," she lied with a hoarse, broken voice. "Soon, my daughter, just hold on a little longer." But she knew it was a lie. She knew there was no little longer. She knew they had reached the end of the road, literally and figuratively. Beatrice held Alice against her chest, felt her daughter's little heart beating too faintly, and finally let the tears fall. Silent tears of defeat, of desperation, of love so immense it physically hurt. "Forgive me," she whispered, kissing Alice's hot little forehead. "Forgive me for not being able to save you. Forgive me for failing as a mother." Alice rested her little head on Beatrice's lap and closed her eyes, a small sigh escaping her parched lips. And it was at that exact moment, in that second of absolute despair and final surrender, that Beatrice heard the noise of an engine in the distance. She opened her eyes, swollen with tears, and saw a cloud of red dust rising on the road, coming in their direction. A car was approaching. Beatrice felt hope and terror in equal measure battling inside her empty chest. Hope because a car meant a person meant possible help, possible water, possible salvation. Terror because it could be a dangerous man, a bandit, someone who would take advantage of their complete vulnerability. But there was no choice. There were no more alternatives. There was nothing to lose because they had already lost everything. The car slowed down as it approached. It was a shiny black Ford, a new model, the kind of car only very wealthy people owned. It passed Beatrice, and she thought it would continue, one more hope dying, but the car braked, stopped a few yards ahead, raising a cloud of dust that made Beatrice cough, and slowly reversed until it stopped right beside the tree where she was sitting. The engine turned off. Silence fell heavy, broken only by the ticking of the cooling engine and the distant song of cicadas announcing the late afternoon. The driver's door opened, squeaking slightly on well-oiled hinges. A man got out. Beatrice lifted her eyes and saw a tall gentleman. He must have been over 6 feet tall, broad shoulders of someone who works with physical strength despite the fine clothes he wore. He wore light beige linen trousers, a white shirt with sleeves rolled up to the elbows, revealing tanned muscular forearms, a brown leather vest over the shirt, worn but quality riding boots. He was 40-something, a face with marked masculine features, a strong jaw with a day's stubble shadowing it, a straight aristocratic nose, thick dark eyebrows. His black hair had some silver strands at the temples, cut short, tousled by the road wind. But what caught Beatrice's attention most were his eyes. They were dark, almost black, deep as a bottomless well, and carried a sadness so ancient and rooted it seemed a permanent part of their color. They were the eyes of a man who had suffered devastating loss and never fully recovered, eyes that knew pain intimately. "Is the lady all right?" he asked with a deep, grave voice, but there was genuine kindness in the tone, real concern in the expression. Beatrice tried to answer, but her throat was too dry. Her voice wouldn't come out. She just shook her head, indicating, no, she wasn't all right. Nothing was all right. He approached with careful steps like someone who doesn't want to startle a wounded animal, squatted in front of her, bringing himself to her eye level. "You're hurt," he noted while examining with a professional gaze. Beatrice saw that he was looking at her bleeding feet, at the torn dress, at Alice too limp in her arms. "You need help," he stated more than asked. Beatrice finally managed to make her voice work. "We're fine," she tried to lie, but the voice came out weak and unconvincing. "Just tired. We're going to Diamond Creek." The man looked at her with an expression that made it clear he didn't believe a word, but he didn't argue. He got up, went to the car, opened the trunk and returned carrying a large metal canteen and a cloth bundle. "Drink," he offered, uncapping the canteen and holding it out to her. Beatrice hesitated only a fraction of a second before thirst conquered any caution. She took the canteen with trembling hands and drank, cool, clean water sliding down her parched throat like a liquid miracle. She drank greedily, water running down the corners of her mouth, wetting her chin, but it didn't matter. Nothing mattered except that blessed sensation of hydration. "Slowly," the man advised with a calm voice, "or you'll get sick." Beatrice forced herself to stop, took a deep breath, then gave water to Alice. The girl drank, making small sounds of relief, eyes closed, enjoying every drop. The man opened the bundle, revealing fresh bread, cured yellow cheese, slices of smoked sausage, and dried fruit preserves. "Eat," he said, placing the bundle in Beatrice's lap. Beatrice looked at that food as if it were a celestial vision. She took a piece of bread, broke it in half, gave half to Alice before eating her own part. The bread was soft, fresh, tasting like paradise to a stomach too empty for too long. Alice chewed slowly, eyes wide, as if she had forgotten what real food was like. Beatrice forced herself to eat slowly, even though she wanted to devour everything. She knew an empty stomach would react badly to excess food. "What is your name?" the man asked while waiting for them to eat, his voice patient and gentle. Beatrice swallowed the piece of cheese before answering. Beatrice Carson, and she is Alice, my daughter." He nodded. "My name is Vincent Sterling. I'm a rancher. I live about 10 miles north of here, Sterling Ranch. Perhaps you've heard of it." Beatrice shook her head, indicating no. Vincent didn't seem offended. "What happened to you two?" he asked, with a careful voice. "Why are you alone on the road, in this condition?" Beatrice felt the familiar shame rise in her chest, tighten her throat. But something in his expression, in the sadness in his eyes that mirrored her own pain, made her feel that maybe, just maybe, he wouldn't judge. So she told him. She told him about Robert, about the pregnancy, about the abandonment, about the family that kicked her out, about the desperate journey seeking survival, about closed doors and growing hunger, about days, walking with no certain destination beyond a vague hope of an orphanage in Diamond Creek. Vincent listened to everything in absolute silence, his expression becoming increasingly somber as the story unfolded. When Beatrice finished, her voice choked with emotion, he stayed quiet for a long moment, looking at Alice, who had finished the bread and was now looking at him with uninhibited childish curiosity. "How old is she?" Vincent asked with a strangely hoarse voice. 2 years and 4 months, Beatrice replied. She turned 2 last January. Vincent reached out and lightly touched Alice's blonde hair with a gesture so gentle and careful that Beatrice saw his hand trembling. The girl smiled at him, an innocent and trusting smile of a child who hadn't yet learned that the world could be cruel, and Beatrice saw something break in the man's eyes. "I had a son too," Vincent said with a voice so low Beatrice had to lean in to hear. "He would be 2.5 now if he had survived, but he died the day he was born, and my wife Amelia died with him. It's been 3 years, 2 months, and 9 days. He looked at Beatrice with eyes shining with unshed tears. "I wasn't there when it happened. I was traveling buying cattle in Kansas City. When I came back 5 days later, they were already buried. I never saw my son's face, never held him, never had the chance to be a father." Beatrice felt her own tears forming. "I'm so sorry," she whispered with deep sincerity. "No one deserves to carry pain like that." Vincent took a deep breath, ran a hand over his face, the gesture of a man trying to compose himself. He stood up, walked a few steps, came back, looked at Beatrice and Alice with the expression of a man making a decision that would change everything. "Beatrice," he began with a firm voice, but loaded with poorly controlled emotion, "I'm going to make you a proposal. And you might think it's complete madness. You might think I'm a dangerous or insane man. You might refuse. But I need to make this proposal, because if I don't, I will regret it for the rest of my life." Beatrice looked at him without understanding, heart racing with a mixture of fear and impossible hope. "What proposal?" she managed to ask. Vincent squatted down again in front of her, looked straight into her eyes with an intensity that made Beatrice unable to look away. "Marry me," he said with absolute clarity. "Come live on my ranch. I will take care of you and Alice. I will provide a home, food, clothes, security, everything you need. I will be a father to Alice. I will give her my last name. I will ensure she grows up safe, educated, happy. And in exchange, you give me the chance to be the father I never got to be." Beatrice stood completely paralyzed. The world around seemed to stop. The sound of cicadas vanished. The heat of the sun disappeared. Only that man kneeling in front of her existed, making a proposal that no sane person would make. "Are you serious, sir?" she managed to ask, with a voice barely leaving her tight throat. "Completely serious," replied Vincent, without taking his dark, intense eyes off hers. Beatrice felt her head spin with possibilities, fears, impossible hopes. "But you don't even know me, sir," she argued with a trembling voice. "I could be a bad woman. It could be that everything my father said about me is true. It could be that I am exactly what people say." Vincent shook his head slowly. "A bad woman doesn't walk for 3 days, carrying a child in her arms, trying to save her from starvation," he replied with unshakable conviction. "A bad woman doesn't almost die of starvation to give the last piece of food to her daughter. I see who you are, Beatrice. I see it in your eyes. I see it in the way you hold that girl as if she were more precious than gold. You are a mother who would do anything, absolutely anything, for her child's well-being, and I respect that more than you can imagine." He looked at Alice, who observed the conversation without understanding but quiet, nestled in her mother's lap. "And when I look at Alice," Vincent continued, his voice becoming choked up, "I see the chance God didn't give me, the chance to protect, to care, to be a father. I know it's insane. I know you don't know me and I don't really know you. But Beatrice, look at me." He pointed to himself. "I have a large ranch, over 2,000 acres of good land. I have 300 head of Hereford cattle, horses, crops. I have a 2-story house, staff, respect in the entire region. I am a man of my word. My reputation is spotless. But I am empty. For 3 years, I have merely existed without truly living, without purpose, without a reason to wake up beyond the routine that keeps me busy but brings me no joy." Vincent took Beatrice's hand carefully, a gentle and respectful gesture. "I'm not asking for love," he explained with raw honesty. "I'm not expecting a true marriage of husband and wife. It's an agreement, understand? A transaction that benefits both sides. You and Alice gain a home, security, food, a future. I gain purpose, I gain a reason to live, I gain the chance to be the father my son never let me be. No one needs to suffer anymore. No one needs to be alone." Beatrice looked at Alice, who played with the hem of her mother's dress, completely oblivious to the conversation that would define the rest of her life. She thought of all the closed doors, all the looks of judgment, all the days walking without hope. She thought of seeing Alice wither until she died in her arms, and she thought of the impossible possibility of a safe house, guaranteed food, a future where Alice could grow up without fear, without hunger, without shame. "And if I accept," Beatrice asked with a hesitant voice, "what exactly will you expect from me?" Vincent understood perfectly the unspoken question, the legitimate concern of a vulnerable woman being offered a situation that seemed too good to be true. "I will expect you to be Alice's mother, which is what you already are," he replied with absolute clarity. "If you want to help with the house, you will be welcome, but I have staff who take care of everything. If you prefer to just live quietly taking care of Alice, that is fine too. I won't expect you to share my room. I won't expect wifely duties. You will have your own room, complete privacy, absolute respect. I give you my word of honor, and in this entire region people know that Vincent Sterling's word is worth more than a signed contract." He squeezed her hand lightly before letting go. "I know it's an impossible decision, Beatrice. I know it's asking for enormous trust from someone you just met, but look at the alternative. Look where you are, where you're going. Do you really think you'll make it to Diamond Creek? And even if you do you really think you can separate from Alice? Hand her over to an orphanage and live knowing you abandoned your daughter?" Beatrice felt tears run down her face, because he was right. She couldn't do it. She would prefer to die together with Alice on the road than hand her daughter over to strangers and live with destroying guilt for the rest of her life. "I accept," Beatrice said before reason, before fear, before caution could speak louder than the desperate instinct of a mother protecting her cub. "I accept to marry you, sir." Vincent closed his eyes for a long moment, took a deep breath like a man who had received absolution he had sought for years, who found an answer to a prayer he didn't even know he was making. When he opened his eyes again, they were shining with unshed tears. "Thank you," he said with a voice hoarse with emotion. "You won't regret it, Beatrice. I promise I will take care of you both." He stood up and extended his hand to help her up. "Let's go home," he said with a firm but gentle voice. "Let's start a new life. For you, for Alice, and for me." The trip to Sterling Ranch took almost 2 hours traveling over dirt roads that wound through the countryside. Beatrice sat in the back seat of the Ford with Alice in her lap, her body finally relaxing after days of extreme tension. The interior of the car was luxurious, with soft caramel leather upholstery, polished wood finishes, large windows with clean glass. Alice, invigorated by the food and water, watched everything with wide eyes of childish fascination, touching the upholstery with small fingers, pointing at cows grazing in the passing fields, asking endless questions that Beatrice answered with a voice still weak but firmer than before. Vincent drove in concentrated silence, occasionally looking in the rear-view mirror to check if they were okay. The hum of the engine was a constant and strangely comforting sound, a mechanical rhythm that lulled them. The landscape changed gradually. The dry, sparse plains gave way to greener lands, well-kept pastures fenced with new barbed wire, crops organized in perfect rows. Beatrice felt a whirlwind of emotions competing inside her tight chest. Immense and overwhelming relief because Alice was safe, because they wouldn't have to starve anymore, sleep in the open, walk until they couldn't take it anymore. Deep gratitude toward that strange man who offered salvation when there was no more hope. but also icy terror crawling up her spine. Terror because she had just agreed to marry a complete stranger. Terror because she didn't really know what awaited her, if Vincent would keep all his promises, if there was some trap hidden in that generosity that seemed impossible. But when she looked at Alice, when she saw her daughter finally relaxed, and without that expression of hunger and fear in her eyes, Beatrice knew she had made the only possible choice. She would do it all again. She would do it 1,000 times. Because a desperate mother accepts any risk, crosses any abyss, makes any deal to save her child from death. Stirling Ranch appeared when the sun began to set, dyeing the horizon in spectacular shades of orange, pink, and purple. Beatrice first saw the high wrought-iron gates painted shiny black, with the ranch's name worked in elaborate and elegant letters on the upper arch. Then she saw the immense pastures extending as far as the eye could see, hundreds of head of Hereford cattle grazing peacefully, their coats shining in the evening light. She saw perfectly aligned and well-maintained fences, enormous barns painted bright red, with zinc roofs gleaming, windmills turning slowly pumping water to the troughs. And finally, she saw the main house, and Beatrice's heart leapt in her chest. It was a majestic construction of 2 full stories. Walls whitewashed immaculate white, roof of perfectly aligned dark shingles, wide porches with turned wooden balustrades on both floors, thick masonry columns supporting the porches, huge windows with clean panes reflecting the colourful evening sky, double doors of dark carved wood at the main entrance. Perfectly tended gardens surrounded the entire entrance of the house. Organized flower beds overflowed with flowers, red and pink roses exhaling a sweet perfume that reached inside the car, white jasmine hanging on trellises, purple bougainvillea covering parts of the side walls. There were ancient oak trees providing generous shade, tall pecan trees flanking the driveway. A carved stone fountain occupied the center of the front garden, crystal-clear water gushing in a graceful 3-tiered arc, making a relaxing and civilized sound that Beatrice had never heard outside of dreams. Beatrice had never seen so much wealth concentrated in one place in her life. Her family had always been poor, living on meager wages from working on other people's farms, living in simple clapboard shacks, eating basic, simple food. The little room she rented in Stony Brook was the best place she had lived, and even so it was tiny and precarious. That there was a palace, wealth she didn't even know existed in rural farms. Vincent parked the Ford in front of the wide stone steps leading to the main porch. He turned off the engine and got out, opening the back door to help Beatrice out. She stepped down holding Alice, feeling legs wobbly not from fatigue now, but from growing nervousness. "Welcome to your new home," Vincent said with a calm voice, but Beatrice detected a hint of anxiety in it too, as if he himself wasn't sure how all this would unfold. At that moment, the double door of the main entrance opened with a slight squeak of well-oiled hinges. A woman appeared in the doorway, and Beatrice felt her stomach tighten instantly into a knot of pure apprehension. The woman was tall, almost Vincent's height, thin to the point of angularity, looking about 48 years old. She wore a long black skirt down to her ankles, a white high-collared blouse closed up to her neck despite the heat, a dark apron tied at her thin waist. Her dark hair, mixed with many grey strands, was pulled back in a tight bun on top of her head, so stretched it pulled the skin at her temples. Her face was all sharp angles, prominent cheekbones, a thin hooked nose, a pointed chin. But what dominated her face were her dark brown eyes, hard as river stones, cold as winter ice, looking at Beatrice and Alice with an expression that mixed contempt, suspicion, and something that looked almost like instant hatred. The woman descended the steps with controlled and precise strides, perfectly upright posture, and stopped in front of Vincent, ignoring Beatrice completely, as if she were invisible. "Vincent," she said with a thin, cutting voice, "where were you?" "I was worried. You said you'd be back from town before noon." It's almost 6 in the evening. Vincent sighed, like a man preparing to face a storm he knew was coming. "Matilda," he replied with a tired voice, "I need to speak with you. Something important happened today." Matilda finally turned her hard eyes to Beatrice and Alice, a gaze sweeping them from head to toe in an evaluation that made it clear she found both deplorably inadequate. "Who are these people?" she asked with an icy tone that made Beatrice shrink instinctively. "Why did you bring them here?" Vincent placed a hand on Beatrice's shoulder in a protective gesture that didn't go unnoticed by Matilda's sharp eyes. "This is Beatrice Carson and her daughter Alice," he introduced with a firm voice. "They are going to live here with us from now on. Beatrice," he continued, looking at her, "this is Matilda, my sister-in-law. She was my wife Amelia's sister. She has lived here since Amelia passed away, manages the household and supervises the staff." Matilda stood completely still, only her eyes blinking once slowly. "Going to live here," she repeated the phrase, as if testing the words on her tongue, not believing what she heard. "Vincent, can we talk in private?" she asked with a low, dangerous voice. "Now, inside the house." Vincent shook his head. "What I have to say can be said right here," he replied with authority growing in his voice. "I'm going to marry Beatrice. Tomorrow we go to Diamond Creek to handle all the paperwork at the courthouse. She will be my wife, and Alice will be my daughter. They will live here permanently, and I expect you to treat them with the respect and cordiality anyone in this house deserves." The silence that fell was so dense and heavy, it seemed to suck out the air. Beatrice held Alice tighter, protective instinct screaming that something dangerous was about to explode. Matilda went white as candle wax, then red, rising up her neck to her cheeks, then white again. Her thin, veiny hands closed into fists so tight her knuckles stood out white. Her mouth opened and closed 3 times before she could form sounds. "You have lost your mind," she said finally, with a voice trembling with rage, so intense it vibrated in the air around. "Completely, absolutely lost your mind, Vincent." She pointed an accusing finger at Beatrice. "Do you know this woman? Do you know where she came from? Do you know what she is? She is dirty, ragged, showed up out of nowhere with a bastard child. Obviously she is a gold digger who saw a rich man and set up this whole situation to trap you." Vincent took a step forward, and his voice came out low, but loaded with dangerous authority that made even Matilda retreat half a step. "Watch the words you use, Matilda," he warned, with a tone that allowed no argument. "Beatrice will be my wife, and deserves respect in this house. Any disrespect to her or Alice will be considered personal disrespect to me. Is that absolutely clear?" Matilda looked at her brother-in-law with eyes flashing with uncontrollable fury. "You will regret this, Vincent Sterling," she spat with poison dripping from every word. "You will regret it bitterly when this woman shows who she really is. When she steals everything you have, when she humiliates you, when she destroys the respectable name you built. Don't come looking for my sympathy. Amelia must be turning in her grave, seeing you bring a harlot into her house, to sleep in her bed, to replace her as if she never existed." Vincent went pale at the mention of his dead wife, but kept his voice controlled. "Amelia has been dead for 3 years, Matilda," he said with pain and firmness mixed. "I suffered, I cried, I kept appropriate mourning, but I am still alive and I have the right to move on. And I am not replacing anyone. I am trying to find a reason to keep living." Matilda gave a bitter laugh with no humor at all, an unpleasant sound like breaking glass. "Reason to live," she repeated with scorn. "You call this a reason to live? Vincent, for the love of God and everything sacred, you have an impeccable reputation, a respected name in 3 counties, an established social position, and you are going to throw everything, absolutely everything, away to marry a tramp you found on the road, with a child of unknown father that probably even she doesn't know who he is." Beatrice felt every word like a slap in the face, felt humiliation burn from her chest to the tips of her ears, felt the urge to sink into the ground and disappear. But before she could say anything, before she could defend herself or simply run away from there, Vincent exploded. "Enough!" he shouted, his voice thundering loud. "Matilda, you have crossed the line. Beatrice is an honest woman who went through terrible difficulties through no fault of her own. I'm going to marry her because I want to, because I chose to, because it gives me a purpose I haven't had for years. And you," he continued, pointing a finger at his sister-in-law, "will treat her with respect, or you will find another place to live. This is my house, my ranch, my decision, and I will not tolerate disrespect. Understood?" Matilda looked at Vincent with an expression of pure hatred mixed with something that looked like deep pain and betrayal. "You will regret it," she repeated with a voice low and cutting as a razor. "You will regret it, and I will be here to say I told you so." She turned her back dramatically and climbed the porch steps with furious strides that made her boot heels strike hard on the wood. She entered the house and slammed the double doors with such force that the sound echoed like a gunshot, making the windows rattle in their frames and birds take flight, startled from nearby trees. Vincent stood staring at the closed door, breathing heavy, hands still clenched in fists, jaw tight. Beatrice saw a struggle happening inside him, saw anger, frustration, pain, all mixed in his expression. After a long moment he took a deep breath, let the air out slowly, and turned to Beatrice with an apologetic expression. "I am sorry for that," he said with a voice full of frustration and embarrassment. "Matilda is a complicated person. She loved Amelia very much. They were very close since childhood. When Amelia died along with the baby, Matilda was devastated. She took over running the house and became very protective, possessive even. But she will get used to the idea. She will accept it eventually." Beatrice doubted that very, very much, but said nothing. She just nodded silently, feeling the weight of the situation press on her shoulders. She had just entered a house where clearly she wasn't welcome, where the person who ran everything hated her instantly, where she would be seen as an intruder and a usurper. But Alice stirred in her arms, yawned sleepily, and Beatrice remembered why she was there. It wasn't for her, it was for Alice. And any humiliation, any hostility, any difficulty was worth it if it meant Alice would be safe. Vincent guided them inside the house, climbing the porch steps, crossing the double doors Matilda had slammed. The interior was even more impressive than the exterior. The entrance hall was huge, soaring ceilings making the space seem like a cathedral. The floor was of wide, polished hardwood planks, shining like a mirror, reflecting light entering through the tall windows. Solid mahogany furniture lined the walls, sideboards with marble tops, carved chairs with dark green velvet upholstery, a tall grandfather clock marking time with solemn ticking. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, hundreds of pendants refracting light into tiny rainbows dancing on the walls. Persian rugs in shades of red, blue, and gold covered parts of the floor. Paintings with gold frames decorated the walls. Portraits of serious people, rural landscapes, still lifes. A broad dark wood staircase curved elegantly to the second floor, polished banister gleaming, steps covered with a red carpet runner fixed with brass rods. Heavy velvet curtains in moss green framed the windows, tied back with thick cords ending in tassels. Everything screamed old, established, respectable wealth. An elderly woman appeared coming from what must have been the kitchen through a side door. She was a good 60 years old, with a full, rounded body of someone who tasted her own cooking, a round, kind face marked by laugh lines around her eyes and mouth, suggesting a lifetime of smiling. Her completely grey hair was tied in a thick braid falling down her back, stray strands escaping around her rosy face. She wore a simple dress of cotton printed with tiny flowers, a white apron tied at her ample waist, cloth slippers on her feet. Her eyes were light brown, gentle, curious, but without judgment. "Mr. Vincent," she called with a soft, warm voice. "I heard the door slam. Is everything all right? Did something happen?" Vincent smiled tiredly, but genuinely at her. "Everything is fine, Mrs. Rose. I want you to meet Beatrice and Alice. They're going to live here with us from now on. Beatrice is going to become my wife." Mrs. Rose widened her eyes in genuine surprise, hand going up to cover her mouth, but unlike Matilda, there was no judgment or coldness in that look. Just surprise mixed with curiosity and something that looked like maternal compassion. "Heavens," she murmured. "Well," she said, composing herself quickly, "you are very welcome, my child." She approached Beatrice with a warm smile. "And hello, precious," she greeted Alice, who hid her shy face in her mother's neck, but peeked at the elderly woman with curiosity. "Mrs. Rose is the ranch cook," explained Vincent. "She has lived here for more than 20 years, since before I married Amelia. She makes the best food in 3 states and takes care of all of us as if we were her children." Mrs. Rose blushed at the praise but smiled satisfied. "Oh, Mr. Vincent exaggerates," she said with false modesty but eyes shining with pleasure. "But it is true that I cook with love, and everyone eats well in this house." Vincent turned to Mrs. Rose with a more serious tone. "Mrs. Rose, could you prepare a hot bath for Beatrice and Alice, and set aside clean clothes that fit them? Then serve a complete, hearty dinner. They need good, nutritious food and rest." "Day." The cook nodded immediately, gentle eyes noticing the state of the torn clothes, the injured feet, the exhaustion stamped on their faces. "Of course, Mr. Vincent. I'll prepare everything right now." She looked at Beatrice with genuine maternal compassion. "Come with me, dear. You look absolutely exhausted. Let's take care of you and this precious one." Beatrice followed Mrs. Rose up the stairs, hands sliding on the polished banister, feet sinking into the soft carpet. Alice looked at everything with wide eyes, pointing at the chandelier, at the paintings, asking questions Beatrice answered in whispers. The second floor had a wide hallway with more dark wood doors on both sides. Mrs. Rose opened one of the doors, and Beatrice entered a room that took her breath away. It was spacious, almost the size of the entire room she rented in Stony Brook. A huge canopy bed dominated the center, carved mahogany structure with white voile curtains tied at the posts, high mattress covered with an embroidered white linen quilt, a mountain of pillows with lace pillowcases. An immense wardrobe occupied an entire wall, mirrored doors reflecting the room. There was an elegant dressing table with an oval mirror, a tall chest of drawers with brass handles, a rocking chair near the large window overlooking the gardens, a side table with a glass lamp, a plush rug covering the wooden floor. "This will be your room," explained Mrs. Rose, opening the window to let fresh air in. "The bathroom is right there." She pointed to an adjacent door. "I'll run the bath." She went to the bathroom, and Beatrice heard water start to run, a comforting, civilized noise. Beatrice stood in the middle of the room, still holding Alice, unable to fully process the change in reality. A few hours ago, she was dying of hunger on the side of a dusty road. Now she was in a luxurious room on a rich ranch, promised in marriage to a millionaire. It seemed like a dream or a nightmare or a hallucination produced by dehydration and hunger. She pinched her own arm, secretly testing if she was awake. It hurt. It was real. Mrs. Rose returned. "The bath is ready, dear. Let me get some clothes for you." She opened the immense wardrobe, and Beatrice saw it was full, completely full of women's dresses, skirts, blouses, nightgowns, undergarments, all of fine quality Beatrice had never touched in her life. "These belong to Miss Amelia," explained Mrs. Rose with a soft, respectful voice. "Mr. Vincent never had the heart to donate or get rid of them. I think you are about the same size as her, maybe a little thinner now, but nothing that won't fit. Feel free to use them. I'm sure she wouldn't mind. Beatrice felt discomfort tighten her throat at the idea of wearing a dead woman's clothes, of a wife Vincent loved and lost, tragically. It seemed invasive, disrespectful, as if she were really trying to replace someone. But she had no choice. She had nothing but the rags she wore. Mrs. Rose picked out a soft white cotton nightgown and a light cream-coloured robe. "For the little one," she said, looking at Alice. "I'll see if I can find something that fits." She left the room and returned minutes later carrying a tiny flannel nightgown embroidered with yellow daisies on the sleeves and collar. Beatrice took the delicate garment and felt a painful knot in her throat, imagining the history behind it. It must have been bought or made for the child Vincent was expecting, the baby who died without ever using the clothes prepared with love and hope. After Mrs. Rose left, closing the door softly, Beatrice took Alice to the adjacent bathroom. It was a wide space with white tile floors, walls half-tiled in light blue. The bathtub was enormous, gleaming white porcelain, gold claw feet, full of steaming hot water, releasing scented vapor rising in spirals. There was a round scented soap smelling of roses, fluffy soft towels stacked on a stool, a soft natural sponge, small bottles of aromatic oils. Beatrice took off her and Alice's dirty, torn clothes, letting the rags fall to the floor in a pathetic heap. She got into the tub holding Alice, hot water wrapping around their sore bodies like a mother's hug. The temperature was perfect, hot enough to relax tense muscles but not scalding. Alice laughed, a crystalline, pure sound Beatrice hadn't heard for weeks. The girl splashed her little hands in the water, enchanted by the novelty. Beatrice washed Alice with reverent care, lathering the thin little body, scrubbing gently to remove days and days of accumulated dirt, untangling the blonde hair with patient fingers, even when Alice complained of the pulling. She saw the water turn dark with earth, saw clean pink skin appear under the crust of dust. She kissed her daughter's forehead repeatedly, tears of relief mixing with the bathwater. Then she washed herself, scrubbing vigorously every inch of skin, washing her hair 3-4 times until it felt completely clean and slipped through her fingers. She used the sponge to scrub her wounded feet, cleaning cuts and burst blisters that stung but needed to be cleaned. She saw the water turn brown with grime and blood, physical evidence of the journey they had survived. They got out of the tub clean for the first time in over a week. Beatrice dried Alice with a soft towel, put on the embroidered nightgown, which was a bit big but fit. Then she dried herself, applied perfumed lotion that was in a bottle on the counter, and made her skin sting but smell wonderful. She put on the soft white nightgown and robe, feeling clean fabric against clean skin like a supreme luxury. When they returned to the room, there was a large tray on the side table. Mrs. Rose had left steaming chicken soup in a porcelain tureen, fresh bread still warm with butter melting, warm milk sweetened with honey in mugs, slices of white cheese, fruit preserves, clusters of green grapes. Beatrice sat in the rocking chair with Alice on her lap and fed her daughter slowly, small spoonfuls of soup, tiny pieces of bread, small sips of milk. Alice ate until her little belly was full and satisfied, then yawned with sleep arriving. Beatrice laid her on the huge bed, covered her with a soft sheet that smelled of lavender and sunshine, watched her daughter fall asleep in seconds, little face finally relaxed and at peace. Only then did Beatrice eat her own portion, savouring every spoonful of the rich soup, with generous chunks of shredded chicken and soft vegetables, every bite of bread that melted in her mouth, every sip of sweet milk. She ate slowly until her stomach was completely full, an almost forgotten sensation. When she finished, she lay down next to Alice on the bed that was soft as a cloud, sank into the comfortable mattress, pulled the quilt over both of them. And then the tears came, silent, uncontrollable tears running down her face, wetting the pillow. Tears of relief so deep it hurt, of immense gratitude, of fear of the unknown, of confusion about everything that had happened. She didn't know what the future would bring, didn't know if Vincent would keep all his promises, didn't know how she would survive Matilda's hostility. But in that moment, Alice was safe, fed, clean, sleeping in peace. And that was everything. Absolutely everything that mattered. If you're enjoying this story, leave a like and share it with someone who needs to believe in second chances and unexpected kindness. 3 days later, Beatrice Carson became Beatrice Sterling in a quick bureaucratic ceremony at the county clerk's office in Diamond Creek. Vincent had arranged everything, spoken to a justice of the peace he knew, settled the necessary paperwork, and paid the fees. The ceremony was witnessed only by Mrs. Rose, who had come along in the car, and old Gus, the ranch's elderly foreman, whom Vincent had introduced briefly. Matilda categorically refused to attend, locking herself in her room when Vincent knocked on her door to invite her. The priest at the main parish had also refused to bless the marriage when Vincent approached him. "I need to investigate the circumstances properly before administering the holy sacrament of matrimony," Father O'Malley had said, his voice dripping with thinly veiled disapproval. "I cannot simply bless a hasty union between a respectable widower and an unknown woman who appeared out of nowhere." Vincent didn't insist. He merely thanked him coldly and left. When they returned to Sterling Ranch officially as husband and wife, the reality of the situation began to weigh on Beatrice. She was Vincent's wife on paper, in documents, before the law, but not in truth. They slept in separate rooms, barely spoke beyond polite courtesies during meals, and lived like polite strangers under the same enormous roof. But Vincent kept absolutely every single promise. Alice had her own room next to Beatrice's, a space filled with toys Vincent had bought during a quick trip to Kansas City. Porcelain dolls with elaborate dresses, hand-carved rocking horses, colorful wooden blocks, books with vibrant illustrations, teddy bears. She had an absurd amount of new clothes, dresses in cheerful colors, soft leather shoes, ribbons for her hair. She ate 3 full, hearty meals every day, slept in a comfortable bed with clean sheets, and played in the huge, completely safe garden. And Vincent treated Alice exactly as he had promised, like a true and beloved daughter. He woke up early every day, and before heading out to supervise work on the ranch, he would go up to Alice's room to say good morning. He returned at noon, specifically to have lunch with her, listening to the confused and enchanting stories a 2-year-old tells. In the afternoon, when he returned from work covered in dust but satisfied, he would pick Alice up and take her to see the animals. He showed her the horses in the stable, letting Alice touch their velvety muzzles, teaching her how to offer a carrot on an open palm. He took her to see the cows with newborn calves, explaining patiently that the little babies needed to stay close to their mothers. Alice laughed with delight, holding Vincent's large, calloused hand with absolute childish trust, calling him Uncle Vincent, with a clumsy pronunciation that made the man smile in a way Beatrice had never seen before. Beatrice watched everything from a distance, feeling a confused whirlwind of emotions. Deep gratitude, because Vincent was a genuinely good man, kind to Alice, fulfilling everything he promised, and more. Relief, because Alice was visibly blooming, gaining weight, getting her color back, becoming a happy and secure child again. But also corrosive guilt, because she saw in Vincent's eyes that every moment with Alice was simultaneously sweet and painfully bitter. She saw how he looked at the girl, with a mixture of love and sadness, how he clenched his fists when Alice laughed loudly, how he turned his face away when Alice fell asleep in his lap and discreet tears trickled down. Vincent was using Alice to try to heal a wound that had never closed, and Beatrice was an accomplice. She felt like an opportunist who had sold access to her own daughter in exchange for safety and comfort. She felt like an emotional prostitute, even knowing she had no choice, that it was a mutually beneficial agreement, that no one was being forced. The weeks passed, establishing a strange and uncomfortable routine. Beatrice woke up early, helped Mrs. Rose in the kitchen even though the cook insisted she didn't need to, took care of Alice, mended clothes that needed repair, and read books from Vincent's extensive library, trying to occupy her restless mind. Vincent worked all day managing the massive ranch, came back for dinner, spent precious time with Alice, then locked himself in his study until very late, doing God knows what. Matilda avoided Beatrice completely, treating her like invisible furniture when they had to be in the same room. She ate at different times, lived in the opposite wing of the house, and only spoke to Vincent about strictly administrative ranch matters with an icy, professional voice. But Beatrice felt the poison Matilda was spreading, like a snake, leaving a trail of venom wherever it passed. She heard maids whispering when she walked by, saw looks of suspicion, felt the tension growing. Matilda was telling the entire community a twisted and malicious version of the story, that Vincent had found a harlot on the road with a bastard child and married her out of temporary insanity caused by loneliness and unresolved grief. That Beatrice was obviously a calculating adventurer who had seduced a rich and vulnerable widower, that the girl was probably premeditated bait, an elaborate setup to hook a millionaire. At church on Sundays, when Vincent insisted that Beatrice and Alice accompany him to Mass, Beatrice felt the whispers following her like a swarm of angry wasps. The women turned their faces ostentatiously when she passed. "What a disgrace, that woman," they whispered loud enough for her to hear. Poor Vincent, bewitched by a shameless tramp. Look at the gall, wearing the late Amelia's clothes as if she had the right. She must be laughing at her luck. She caught a handsome millionaire with a well-cast net. Beatrice endured it in silence, chin up, eyes fixed ahead, hands clenched until her nails left marks in her palms. She owed no explanations to these people. She didn't need to defend herself before a tribunal of ill-intentioned gossips. But the words hurt like repeated stabs in the same spot, a wound that wouldn't heal because it kept being ripped open. And the worst part, the absolutely worst part, was that part of her believed those cruel accusations. Part of her thought she really was a user who had utilized her daughter to guarantee a comfortable life, that she didn't deserve any of this, that she was a fraud, living a lie. It was on a rainy afternoon in June, a full 6 weeks after the hasty wedding, that Beatrice discovered Vincent's secret. Alice was taking her afternoon nap, Mrs. Rose had gone to town for weekly shopping, and Matilda was visiting her daughter Clara at a neighboring property. The house was silent, only the sound of heavy rain beating against the windows and roof, creating a monotonous and melancholic melody. Beatrice walked down the second-floor hallway with no particular destination, just wandering through the huge house, trying to occupy her time and mind. That was when she noticed a door ajar at the end of the hall, a door that was always locked, always forbidden. It was Vincent's private study, the sanctuary where he spent hours every night. But today, the door was open, just a small crack, but definitely unlocked. Beatrice knew she shouldn't go in, that it was a gross invasion of privacy, a violation of trust. But curiosity and an almost desperate need to understand this mysterious and complex man spoke louder than common sense. She pushed the door slowly, a slight squeak from the well-oiled hinges, and entered. The study was spacious and masculine, with a large, polished, dark mahogany desk occupying a central position near the large window overlooking the pastures stretching to the horizon. Bookshelves covered 2 entire walls, hundreds of leather-bound volumes, spines with gold lettering. Detailed maps of the ranch with divisions of pastures and crops decorated another wall. There was a deep, comfortable leather chair, a Persian rug in shades of green and brown, an oil lamp on the desk, a glass inkwell, organized writing quills. But what completely captured Beatrice's attention were the journals. Dozens of them, perhaps 50 or more, stacked carefully on a special shelf made specifically for them, all bound in identical dark brown leather, all the same size, all identified with dates written in black ink on the spines. The dates ranged from 3 years ago up to the previous week. Beatrice approached as if hypnotized, her hand reaching out before her conscience could stop her. She picked a notebook at random, dated 4 months ago. She opened it with slightly trembling hands and immediately recognized Vincent's firm, masculine handwriting, letters formed with precision and control. They weren't ranch records or administrative accounts. They were letters to someone named Michael. The first page began, "My son Michael today marks 1,020 days since you left. 1,020 days that I wake up every morning trying to breathe without you and without your mother. 1,020 days carrying guilt that crushes me like a stone in my chest." Beatrice felt the invasion of privacy burn her conscience like a hot iron. She knew she should close the notebook, leave, forget, but she couldn't. She continued reading, eyes devouring words that revealed the tortured soul of a man destroyed by loss and guilt. The letters were desperate confessions of a father who lost his son before knowing him. Vincent wrote about the corrosive regret of having traveled to Kansas City to buy cattle when Amelia was in her 8th month of pregnancy. He wrote about how he should have noticed she wasn't well in the days before he left, about how he ignored signs because business seemed urgent. He wrote about recurring nightmares where he heard a baby crying somewhere in the house, ran desperately from room to room but never found him, woke up sweating and shaking. He wrote about the void nothing could fill, about the huge ranch that felt like an empty mausoleum, about success and wealth that meant absolutely nothing without a family to share it with. Beatrice picked up another notebook, more recent, from the previous week. She read words that completely changed her understanding of everything. "My son, Michael," Vincent had written with handwriting shaky with emotion. "Today, Alice called me Daddy for the first time. I was showing her the new colts in the stable, and she tugged on my sleeve with her little hand and said, 'Daddy, that horsey is the prettiest.' My heart stopped completely. I didn't know how to answer. I stood there like an idiot with tears wanting to come out. Beatrice heard and corrected her quickly, explained to Alice that I am Vincent, not her father. But Michael, my son, I wanted to be. God forgive me for this thought, but I wanted so much to be that girl's father." The writing continued, becoming more irregular, as if written with a trembling hand. "She has the smile I imagine you would have had. She laughs easily, trusts easily, loves without fear, and every day with her is simultaneously a blessing and torture because I love you infinitely, but you are not here and she is. And I know it's wrong. I know I am using Beatrice and Alice to fill the hole you two left. But son, I was drowning in darkness before they arrived. I was seriously considering ending it all, joining you and your mother, and then that desperate woman appeared with a child in her arms on the side of that road, and I saw a chance to have purpose again, to be useful, to be needed by someone." Beatrice closed the notebook, with hands shaking violently, leaned against the desk because her legs threatened to give way. Her heart beat out of rhythm, thoughts spinning chaotically. Now she understood everything with painful clarity. She understood why Vincent had made the insane proposal. She understood the look he had when he held Alice. She understood the pain he carried like an invisible but incredibly heavy cross on his back. She understood that Vincent was just as desperate as she was when she accepted, only desperate in a different way. She was desperate for physical survival. He was desperate for emotional survival. And more than that, she understood with crystal clarity that the two of them were using each other exactly as Vincent had written. She used him to save Alice and herself from misery and death. He used her and Alice to try to heal a wound of impossible loss. There was no moral superiority on either side, just two completely broken human beings trying to survive through a mutually beneficial agreement, each receiving what they desperately needed. But this understanding brought a new and crushing weight, because now Beatrice knew that every smile Alice gave Vincent was remedy and poison simultaneously. Every time Alice called him father without fully understanding the meaning, it was healing and torture. And Beatrice was an accomplice to it all, an active participant in an arrangement that helped but also hurt. She put the notebooks back exactly where they were, wiped tears that flowed uncontrollably, and left the office, closing the door carefully. She returned to her room with the world looking different, with a new weight on her shoulders. That night, during a silent dinner, she looked at Vincent with completely new eyes. She saw deep weariness in his shoulders, ancient but constant sadness in his eyes, the conscious effort he made to smile when Alice told disjointed little kid stories. And she felt painful and deep compassion mixed with guilt that tightened her chest. In the following days, Beatrice tried to be more present, more involved in his life. She talked more during meals, asked about the ranch, genuinely interested, about work, about future plans. Vincent seemed surprised, but clearly grateful for the attention. Gradually, they began to develop something resembling a cautious friendship, conversations getting longer, silences becoming more comfortable. But Matilda noticed the change and intensified her attacks with cruel determination. One afternoon, Beatrice heard Matilda talking to her daughter Clara in the living room, voices carrying down the hall. "She is settling in more and more," Matilda said, with a voice bitter as bile. "She's starting to act like the mistress of the house, as if she has a real right. I need to make Vincent see the truth before it's too late, before she manipulates him completely." Clara, a 28-year-old woman Beatrice had met briefly, conventionally pretty but with no particular sparkle in her grey eyes, replied with a tired voice carrying exhausted patience. "Mother, for the love of God, maybe you should accept the situation. Vincent seems happier than he has been in years. The girl is sweet and lovely. Maybe this is good for him. Maybe it's exactly what he needed." Matilda let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "You are too naive, Clara. That woman is planning everything with precision. She is probably already looking for ways to access the money, to keep the inheritance, to drive Vincent away from true friends and family who care about him. I will not allow this to happen. I won't sit by and watch her destroy everything Amelia built," and Matilda really began a more aggressive campaign. The following week, she spread to the entire community that Beatrice was preventing Vincent from visiting old friends, that she was controlling the ranch's finances, that she planned to cut Vincent off from his family. None of this was remotely true. Beatrice barely spoke to Vincent beyond basic conversations, didn't touch financial matters, didn't get involved with his friendships. But lies spread fast and efficiently like fire in a dry field. Neighboring ranchers began to avoid Vincent, refusing invitations to dinners, canceling business deals established years ago. The priest gave a veiled but obvious sermon about cunning women who deceive good men using charm and manipulation. The ladies of the village whispered dramatically loud when Beatrice passed, ensuring she heard every poisonous word about her supposed calculating and immoral nature. Vincent noticed the growing social isolation, but didn't fully understand the extent and cruelty of Matilda's systematic campaign. Beatrice knew everything, but didn't tell. She felt she had no right to create greater conflict between Vincent and his sister-in-law, not when she herself was an intruder who had invaded an established life, not when she was living off an agreement that benefited herself as much as him. So she endured in painful silence, chin up, ignoring cutting looks, protecting Alice from absolutely all of it with maternal ferocity. It was in mid-July, exactly 2 months after the hasty wedding, that everything changed in a way absolutely no one could have predicted or prepared for. Alice woke up on a Monday morning with a fever. Beatrice noticed her little forehead was hot when she went to wake her daughter, saw cheeks too rosy, heard breathing slightly faster than normal. She called Mrs. Rose, who prepared a medicinal herbal tea and a cold cloth compress. The fever went down a little during the morning, but returned in the afternoon even higher, Alice hot as an ember. Vincent immediately sent for Dr. Albright from the village, a competent middle-aged doctor within the limitations of the era and location. He examined Alice carefully, listened to her chest with a stethoscope, checked her throat with a wooden depressor. Eyes, ears. "It's a respiratory infection," he diagnosed with a worried expression, furrowing his brow. "Could be a bad cold, or could be developing into something more serious like bronchitis. We need to watch carefully. If she gets worse in the next 24 hours, it could evolve into pneumonia, which is extremely dangerous in a child this small." The word pneumonia fell on Vincent like a heavy hammer hitting an anvil. Beatrice saw the colour drain completely from his face, leaving him pale as wax, saw his hands shake violently when he took the glass of water Mrs. Rose offered. He left Alice's room without saying a word, steps quick and uncoordinated, and locked himself in his study. Beatrice heard his footsteps pacing frantically back and forth, walking without stopping for hours. For the entire night, Beatrice stayed awake beside Alice's bed, changing cold compresses soaked in vinegar water, giving water with small spoons, softly singing lullabies her mother sang when Beatrice was a child. Alice whimpered with fever, asked to be held with a tearful voice, grabbed her mother's neck with little hands too hot and sticky with sweat. "Mommy, cold!" she complained, even burning with high fever. Beatrice wrapped her in blankets, held her tight against her chest, whispered comforting lies that everything would be okay soon, that it was just a passing fever. Vincent appeared at the bedroom door multiple times during the endless night, stood there watching without entering, without speaking, without offering help. He just looked with an expression of absolute dread stamped on his pale face, eyes too wide, breathing shallow. Beatrice understood perfectly. He was reliving the night he lost his wife and son, seeing terrifying ghosts of the past, overlaying the present, paralyzed by fear so intense it stole his capacity for action. On the second night, the fever got dramatically worse. Alice began to cough, a deep, wet cough coming from the bottom of her small chest, a horrible sound that made Beatrice feel every cough as if it were tearing her own chest. The girl breathed with increasing difficulty, making strange and frightening noises as if she were drowning, a wheeze in her chest audible even without a stethoscope. Dr. Albright returned, called urgently at dawn by old Gus, who rode to the village at dangerous speed. The doctor examined Alice again, his expression becoming increasingly grave. "It's pneumonia," he confirmed the worst possible diagnosis with a heavy voice. "The infection has settled in the lungs. She needs constant intensive care, cold compresses to try to lower the fever, hot water steam with eucalyptus oil to help breathing, constant fluids to avoid dehydration, and lots of luck." He looked at Beatrice with eyes carrying compassion and brutal honesty. "And if she doesn't get better in the next 48 hours?" asked Beatrice, with a voice that could barely leave her throat tight with fear. "Doctor..." Albright hesitated visibly before answering, the weight of the difficult truth on his shoulders. "In children, this small, pneumonia has a very high mortality rate, especially if the fever doesn't break. The lungs fill with fluid, breathing becomes impossible. We don't have adequate medical resources here. Do absolutely everything you can, and pray. That is all within our reach now." Vincent heard that from the bedroom door where he stood. Beatrice saw him close his eyes tight, saw his jaw clench painfully, saw his hands grip the doorframe so hard his knuckles turned white. He turned abruptly and left, went down the stairs almost running, left the house slamming the door. Beatrice saw through the window as he walked quickly towards the pastures in the middle of the cold dawn, disappearing into complete darkness. The following hours were the longest and most terrifying of Beatrice's entire life. Alice got visibly worse by the hour. Fever rose to dangerous levels, skin burning to the touch, breathing became increasingly difficult and labored, every inhalation a visible and painful effort. Coughing tore through her small chest with violence. Mrs. Rose helped tireless and devoted, preparing pots of steam with eucalyptus leaves, making medicinal teas from herbs she had known since childhood, changing sheets soaked in sweat. But Alice withered in Beatrice's arms. Her skin turned pale with a frightening greyish tone, lips purplish from lack of adequate oxygen, body too limp, eyes glazed and unfocused. Beatrice prayed every prayer she knew, invented new prayers in growing desperation, bargained with God with impossible promises. "Take me, but let her live," she implored mentally with the fervor of someone negotiating their own soul. "She is innocent, pure, doesn't deserve to suffer like this. I will do anything, accept any punishment, any suffering. Just don't take my daughter from me. Please, please, please." When the sun rose on the third morning, painting the sky pink and gold, indifferent to human suffering, Alice was so bad that Beatrice sincerely thought she was going to lose her. The girl no longer reacted to stimuli, didn't open her eyes, didn't recognize her mother's voice, just breathed with extreme and terrifying difficulty, every breath a visible effort that seemed impossible to sustain. Beatrice held her against her chest, wetting blonde hair with uncontrollable tears that fell ceaselessly. "Don't go, my daughter, my love, my life," she whispered desperately, rocking the small body. "Please don't leave me alone. You are everything I have in the whole world, everything. If this story is touching your heart, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, and share with those you love." It was at that exact moment of absolute despair that Vincent entered the room. He had spent the entire night outside, returned dirty with mud and dew, clothes rumpled, hair disheveled, eyes red and swollen. But there was something fundamentally different about him. An iron determination that didn't exist before, upright posture replacing shoulders hunched in defeat. "Let me take care of her," said Vincent with a firm and controlled voice, despite being choked with emotion. Beatrice looked at him without fully understanding. "Please, Beatrice," he insisted urgently, "I need to do this. I need to be here. I need to help. I can't run away again like a coward." Beatrice saw in his dark eyes courage painfully being born from a deep place where paralyzing fear lived, saw a man making a conscious decision to face his worst terror because loving meant risking loss again. She nodded mutely, passed Alice carefully into Vincent's strong arms. He sat in the rocking chair, settled the girl in his lap with reverent care, adjusted blankets, and began to do exactly what Beatrice had been doing. He changed the cold compress on the feverish forehead with surprisingly gentle hands, gave water with a small spoon, adjusted her position to ease breathing, and began to speak with a low but firm voice. "Alice," he said with a voice choked but determined, "you need to get well. You need to fight with all the strength you have. I know you can because you are brave, you are valiant, you are full of life and light. Don't give up now. Please don't give up. I need you. Your mother needs you more than anything. The whole ranch needs you. The horses are all waiting for you to come back and give them funny names. The cows miss you. Mrs. Rose is saving butterscotch pudding especially for when you get better. And I," he continued with his voice breaking, "I need to see you run through the garden again. I need to hear your laugh. I need you to call me Daddy, even knowing I'm not." Beatrice stood leaning against the wall, listening with her heart broken into 1,000 pieces. Vincent kept talking, sometimes chatting with Alice, sometimes praying prayers he must have learned in childhood, sometimes singing lullabies with a hoarse, masculine voice completely inadequate, but touching. He didn't leave that chair for interminable hours. When Beatrice offered to replace him, worried about his fatigue, he refused categorically. "No," he said with absolute firmness. "I stay. I need to stay here with her." Mrs. Rose brought food he didn't eat. Water he drank distractedly. Blankets he accepted gratefully when the temperature dropped. Matilda appeared at the bedroom door once, attracted by the unusual activity. She saw Vincent completely dedicated to that child who wasn't biologically his, saw genuine paternal devotion, saw true love. And something changed profoundly in her hard expression. She stood there observing in silence for long minutes, then withdrew without saying a word. Evening fell, night arrived again, bringing darkness and renewed fear. Alice remained critically ill, but Vincent didn't give up even for a second. He held the girl, changed compresses religiously, gave medicine and fluids, talked, prayed, sang, promised. Beatrice took turns with him now, the two working together in perfect sync, united in a purpose that completely transcended the agreement they had made. It was no longer about transaction or calculated mutual benefit. It was about pure and genuine love, love of parents, for a daughter they chose to protect and love unconditionally. In the fourth early morning, the small but immense miracle happened. Alice opened her eyes. It was only a few seconds, a confused and disoriented look of a very sick child, but they were open eyes, living eyes, eyes focusing. Vincent felt her stir weakly in his lap, looked down and saw those clear blue eyes staring at him. "Alice," he called with a trembling voice of hope being born. "Are you there with me? Do you hear me?" The girl blinked slowly with visible effort, tried to speak, but only a weak and hoarse whisper came out. "Daddy." The word came out poorly pronounced, dragged by the fever, but it was unmistakable and clear. "Daddy." Vincent began to cry, unable to control it. Thick tears running down his face, wetting 4 days of stubble, dripping onto Alice's sweaty hair. "I'm here, my daughter, my precious girl," he replied with a voice completely broken with emotion. "I'm here, and I'm never leaving. You're going to get well. I promise solemnly. I promise I will take care of you always." And miraculously, Alice really did get better. Slowly, painfully slowly, but she improved steadily. The fever began to drop gradually on the 5th day, degree by degree, returning to less dangerous levels. Breathing became less difficult on the 6th day, wheezing diminishing. The cough began to loosen on the 7th day, expelling mucus. On the 8th day she asked for water herself, a sign Mrs. Rose celebrated as a divine miracle with tears of joy. On the 10th day she sat up in bed without help, looking around with returning curiosity. On the 12th day she smiled for the first time, a weak but genuine smile that lit up the whole room. During Alice's entire slow recovery, Vincent didn't return to routine work on the ranch. Old Gus took over everything temporarily, managing with the competence of someone who had known every inch of that land for 30 years. Vincent stayed by Alice's side almost 24 hours a day, splitting shifts only with Beatrice, caring with devotion that went far, far beyond obligation or agreement. It was a true father caring for a true daughter with unconditional love. And Beatrice watched everything with a heart overflowing with gratitude and new understanding. Gratitude because Vincent literally saved Alice with constant presence and dedicated loving care. Understanding because she saw clearly now that what started as a calculated transaction had transformed organically into genuine, true family love. One night when Alice finally slept peacefully for the first time in weeks, breathing normally, fever completely absent, Beatrice and Vincent were sitting on the wide porch of the house, looking at stars shining in the clear July sky. The silence between them was comfortable, charged with mutual understanding. "Thank you," said Beatrice softly, breaking the silence, "for everything you did, for staying, for caring, for not giving up on her even with all the fear I know you felt." Vincent shook his head slowly. "No need to thank me for anything," he replied with a hoarse voice. "She is my daughter. Of course I was going to care, going to fight for her with everything I have." Beatrice looked at him in the soft light of the crescent moon. "We never really talked about it," she began with a hesitant voice. "About why you really made that insane proposal. About what you really want and need from this whole arrangement." Vincent stayed quiet for a long moment, looking at stars as if seeking the right words written there. "You know why?" he finally answered with raw honesty. "I saw in Alice the chance to be the father I tragically lost. I saw a chance to fill a void that was consuming me alive. It was selfish on my part, I acknowledge completely. I used your extreme vulnerability to gain something I desperately needed to keep living." Beatrice felt tears sting. "And I used you to save my daughter from hunger and certain death," she confessed with a choked voice. "I agreed to marry without knowing you, without love, only out of absolute motherly desperation. We both made a cold agreement for selfish reasons." Vincent turned to look directly at her, took her hand carefully. "But it's not just a calculated agreement anymore," he said slowly. "Is it, Beatrice? When Alice almost died, when I held her in that chair thinking I was going to lose her and relive the worst nightmare of my life, I realized something fundamental. It wasn't about filling a void or replacing an old loss. It was about her specifically, about that unique girl with that specific smile, that crystal laugh, that way of wrinkling her nose when she doesn't like something. I love her, Beatrice, truly, deeply love her, as my legitimate daughter, not as a convenient substitute, not as a temporary remedy, as the daughter of my heart." Beatrice felt a sob escape, tears finally falling. "I know," she whispered. "I saw you caring for her, fighting for her, refusing to give up even while terrified. I saw true and unconditional love. And I am grateful, Vincent. So immensely grateful I don't have adequate words." Vincent squeezed her hand gently. "And I am eternally grateful to you for giving me this incredible chance," he said with absolute sincerity, "for trusting me with your precious daughter, for accepting the insane proposal of a desperate man on the side of the road. You gave me life again, Beatrice, gave me real purpose, a reason to wake up every day, a genuine reason to smile." They stayed like that, hands intertwined, looking at stars, feeling something change deeply between them. Something that was no longer just agreement or convenience, but began to look like true respect, genuine affection, perhaps even the beginning of real love. In the following weeks, while Alice finished her complete recovery, the dynamic at the ranch changed visibly for everyone. Vincent and Beatrice spent much more time together, talking during prolonged meals, walking through the flower gardens in the afternoons, working side by side, caring for Alice. They laughed together at the funny stories Alice told with the peculiar logic of a small child, planned outings together for when she was completely strong, discussed her education with the seriousness of dedicated parents. And slowly, carefully, delicately, something like true love began to grow and bloom between them. It wasn't the explosive passion of juvenile romance or fairy tales. It was something deeper, more solid, more lasting. It was built on honestly shared vulnerability, on sleepless nights caring for a sick child, on fears confronted together courageously, on mutual respect that grew daily. Matilda observed everything with an undeciphered but clearly changed expression. She had witnessed Vincent at the absolute edge of emotional collapse caring for Alice, had seen true devotion that couldn't be faked or manipulated, had realized that this wasn't financial interest or an elaborate setup. It was genuine family love that had formed in an unconventional but absolutely real and true way. It was on a golden afternoon in August that Matilda finally sought Beatrice out, deliberately. The young woman was in the garden with Alice, almost completely recovered, playing with a new doll Vincent had bought. Matilda approached with hesitant steps, posture completely different from the arrogance she had always shown before. "Beatrice," she called with an unusually soft and almost shy voice, "can I speak with you in private?" Beatrice tensed instantly, mentally preparing for a new verbal attack. But there was something different in Matilda's eyes, something that looked like genuine regret mixed with pain. They moved away a little while Alice continued playing under Mrs. Rose's supervision. Matilda took a deep breath like someone preparing for an extremely difficult task. "I need to offer sincere apologies," she began with a trembling voice, "for the terrible way I treated you, for the cruel things I said, for the malicious lies I spread deliberately. I was completely wrong, profoundly and totally wrong." Beatrice was too surprised to answer immediately. Matilda continued with tears beginning to form. "When my sister Amelia died with the baby, I blamed Vincent unfairly, blamed him for traveling, for not being present, for not having saved her somehow. And then I clung to anger, to bitterness, to absolute control of the house, because it was the only way I knew to honor her memory and deal with devastating loss. When you appeared, I saw it only as a terrible threat. I saw it as deep disrespect to Amelia's sacred memory, as an unacceptable replacement." Tears flowed freely down Matilda's angular face now. "But when I saw Vincent caring for Alice during her illness, when I saw him fighting against his own fear and trauma to stay by her side, I realized an important truth. Vincent wasn't betraying Amelia's memory in any way. He was finally healing from a wound that was killing him slowly. He was learning to live again, to love again, to be the father he always desperately wanted to be. And you made that possible, Beatrice. You and Alice. You literally saved him from darkness that was devouring him completely." Beatrice felt her own tears forming. "I didn't do anything special or heroic," she murmured. "I just accepted help when I was absolutely desperate." Matilda shook her head vigorously. "You gave him a real family, gave him true purpose, gave genuine love when he thought he could never feel it again. And I was cruel, unjust, malicious, because I was stuck in the painful past, completely incapable of letting Vincent move on to a future." Matilda took Beatrice's hands urgently. "Please forgive me. Let me start completely over. Let me be part of this beautiful family you are building with so much love." Beatrice looked at that woman who had been a relentless enemy for months and saw only a broken human being trying desperately to fix mistakes. "Of course I forgive you," she replied with a voice choked with emotion. "We all deserve second chances and an opportunity for a fresh start." The two women hugged, crying, releasing months of accumulated tension and stored pain. Alice came running, worried about the tears, and they both picked her up together, laughing and crying simultaneously. Healing was happening miraculously. For everyone. Matilda's change was genuine, complete, and lasting. She began to treat Beatrice with true respect and even growing affection. She helped with Alice lovingly, taught traditional family recipes, told stories of the ranch and region. And most importantly, she went personally to the village and meticulously corrected every lie she had spread. She told the church ladies, the neighboring ranchers, the priest, the complete truth about Beatrice and Vincent. She publicly admitted she invented malicious stories out of hurt and misplaced jealousy. She asked them to treat Beatrice with the respect she deserved as Vincent's legitimate wife. The community's reaction was slow, but eventually positive and welcoming. Father O'Malley came personally to the ranch to offer formal apologies and offer the matrimonial blessing he had previously refused. Neighbors returned to visit, to do business, to treat Vincent normally. The ladies of the village began to greet Beatrice, some apologizing for the cruel looks and comments. Clara became a true and close friend to Beatrice. She visited frequently, played with Alice, talked for hours about life, dreams, hopes. She confessed she had always envied not the possibility of marrying Vincent, but Beatrice's extraordinary courage to restart her entire life, even with everything against her. Months passed, bringing changes and healing. September arrived with spring exploding, flowers blooming, trees gaining new and vibrant life. Alice was completely recovered, running through the gardens, learning to ride a pony Vincent had bought especially for her, laughing with contagious joy. Vincent was visibly transformed. The weight he carried on his shoulders had lifted significantly. His eyes no longer held constant deep sadness. He smiled with genuine ease. And Beatrice discovered something surprising. She was genuinely happy, not happiness born of gratitude or temporary relief. It was real, complete, deep happiness. She loved that ranch with growing passion, loved taking care of the house, loved seeing Alice growing up safe and loved by everyone, loved afternoons with Mrs. Rose in the kitchen learning recipes, loved conversations with Matilda about flowers and gardens, loved family dinners where everyone laughed and talked animatedly. And she realized, with a mixture of surprise and inevitability, that she was falling deeply and truly in love with Vincent. Not for the money or material security he provided, but for the man he was, essentially, for the gentle way he treated Alice, for the infinite patience teaching the girl about animals and plants, for the kindness with which he treated staff, for the integrity demonstrated in business, for the extraordinary strength with which he faced his own paralyzing fear to care for sick Alice. One starry night in October, after Alice had fallen asleep happy, Beatrice and Vincent were on their favorite porch. There was a huge full moon illuminating silver pastures, fresh spring air bringing intense scent of jasmine, sound of crickets creating a tranquil melody. Vincent took Beatrice's hand naturally. "Beatrice," he began with a hesitant voice revealing nervousness. "These months living with you and Alice have been the most genuinely happy I've had since I lost Amelia and Michael tragically. You brought true light back to this house, to my entire life, and I wanted to know if—" He paused, seeking the right words. "If perhaps this agreement of ours could become something more, something real and true." Beatrice felt her heart race violently. She looked at Vincent, her dark eyes reflecting silver moonlight, at vulnerability completely exposed on his masculine face. "It already is real," she replied softly with conviction. "At least for me, it is completely real. You are no longer just a man who offered me help on the road. You are a man I respect deeply, admire genuinely, trust completely. A man I truly love." Vincent let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He pulled Beatrice closer, embraced her carefully as if she were precious and fragile. "I love you too," he confessed with a choked voice. "I don't know when it happened exactly. Maybe it was when I saw you caring for Alice with such absolute devotion. Maybe it was when you didn't judge me after discovering the notebooks. Maybe it was when you let me care for Alice when she was dying, trusting me with what is most precious to you. But it happened. And it is true love, Beatrice. Not replacement, not convenience. It's you." They kissed for the first time, a gentle kiss loaded with accumulated emotion, a kiss that sealed the miraculous transformation of agreement into true marriage, of convenience into genuine and lasting love. When they separated, both were crying and smiling simultaneously. The following months were of discovery and beautiful construction. Vincent and Beatrice learned to be not only Alice's dedicated parents, but true husband and wife. They shared a room now, shared dreams and fears, shared hopes. They made plans for the future, to expand the herd, to build a school in the village, to travel with Alice when she got bigger. In December, on Christmas Eve, Beatrice confirmed something she had suspected for weeks. She was pregnant. When she told Vincent, she saw his eyes fill with tears. Fear and joy fought visibly on his face. "I'll be here this time," he promised with a firm voice. "I'll be by your side every second. I won't ever leave you alone." Beatrice held his face. "I know," she whispered. "I trust you completely." In August of 1959, exactly 15 months after Beatrice accepted the proposal on the road, she went into labor. Vincent was by her side, holding her hand, wiping sweat, whispering encouragement. Mrs. Rose and an experienced midwife handled everything. Matilda took care of Alice, keeping the girl distracted. The birth was long but successful. At dawn, Michael Vincent Sterling was born, a healthy baby with strong lungs. Vincent held his son in his arms, looked at the little face, and felt final healing. It wasn't a replacement. It was a new son, new life, new chance, and he was alive to see it. Beatrice watched husband and son with a heart overflowing. Alice met her brother and was amazed. In the following days, the ranch filled with visitors celebrating. Father O'Malley blessed the child in a beautiful ceremony. Old Gus cried, saying he'd never seen Mr. Vincent so happy. Mrs. Rose prepared a huge feast, and Matilda, holding her nephew in her arms, looked at Vincent and Beatrice and said with a voice full of peace that had been missing for years, "Amelia would be happy seeing you like this, Vincent, seeing this beautiful family you built with so much love and sacrifice. Life always goes on, and you deserve all this happiness you earned." 3 years later, on a golden autumn afternoon in 1962, Beatrice was sitting on the porch, watching the scene before her, with a heart overflowing with deep contentment. Alice, now a full 7 years old, was patiently teaching Michael, 3 years old, how to kick a ball in the garden. The crystalline laughter of the two children filled the warm afternoon air, a sound more beautiful than music. Vincent was returning from the pastures riding his favorite horse, a sorrel named Lightning, waving as he saw the family gathered. Sterling Ranch was visibly prospering. Vincent had expanded the business with intelligence and work, built a school in the village named after Amelia in respectful honor of his first wife, donated regularly to the Sisters' Orphanage in Diamond Creek, where Beatrice had almost left Alice years ago. The irony wasn't lost on her, and she gave thanks daily for having been saved from that fate. Beatrice managed the house with the now friendly help of Matilda, who had become a dedicated and loving grandmother to Alice and Michael, spoiling the children with hidden sweets and family stories. Mrs. Rose still cooked delicious dishes that made the house smell like a true home. Old Gus, older and wiser, remained the loyal foreman and was now an honorary grandfather who taught Michael about horses. Clara had married a good rancher from the neighboring region the previous year, visited frequently with her husband, and belly growing with her first child. The friendship between the two women was genuine and strong, built on mutual respect. Beatrice frequently thought of that afternoon in May, 4 years ago, when she was literally dying of hunger on the side of the dusty road, without hope, without a future, without anything but Alice in her arms. She thought of the absolutely insane proposal a stranger had made, a proposal any sensible person would have refused out of pure fear. She thought of the agreement both made for desperate and selfish reasons, each seeking their own salvation. And she thought of how that impossible and unlikely agreement transformed into a truer and deeper love than she ever imagined possible. How two human beings completely broken and destroyed by life had healed each other through patience, vulnerability, time, and the conscious choice to love. How an improvised family born of despair became more real, stronger, truer than many blood families she had known. Vincent dismounted the horse with agile movement, climbed the wide porch steps, kissed Beatrice with tenderness that still made her heart race even after years together. He looked at the children playing in the flowery garden. "Our family," he said with a voice full of deep gratitude and admiration. Beatrice intertwined her fingers with his, a natural and comforting gesture. "Our family." She agreed with a complete smile. Alice shouted, calling their attention. "Daddy, Mummy, look! I taught Michael to kick right." Vincent and Beatrice went down to the garden, joined the children, played until the sun began to set, painting the sky impossible colors. That night, after the children slept, Vincent and Beatrice returned to the porch with steaming cups of coffee. The sky was full of stars shining like diamonds scattered on black velvet. "Do you regret it?" asked Vincent, breaking the comfortable silence. "Accepting that crazy proposal from a stranger on the road?" Beatrice looked at him, at the man who had become her safe harbor, her true love, dedicated father of her children. "Not for a second," she replied with absolute conviction. "It was the best decision I ever made in my life, even if made out of desperation and fear. And you," she asked, "do you regret stopping that day?" Vincent pulled her into a tight hug. "I only regret not stopping sooner," he whispered against her hair. "You and Alice saved me, Beatrice. You brought me back to life when I was ready to give up on everything. You gave me a reason to wake up, to fight, to love again. You are a miracle I didn't deserve, but received anyway." They stood embraced, watching the stars, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, feeling the deep peace of someone who has found their place in the world. The dusty road that was almost the end for Beatrice and Alice had become the beginning of everything that mattered. The agreement born of despair had transformed into a love that sustained, healed, and would last forever. Because sometimes the best stories don't start with love at first sight or perfect fairy tale romance. Sometimes they start with two broken people making an imperfect agreement in a moment of absolute despair, and they transform through courage to face fears, patience to heal wounds, vulnerability to open hearts, and time to build trust into a love that overcomes any obstacle. The insane proposal of a desperate man to an even more desperate woman on the side of that dusty road had become the foundation of a family stronger and truer than any built on conventional bases. And every day, when Vincent looked at Beatrice and the children, when he saw the home they had built together on the ruins of destroyed previous lives, he silently gave thanks for having had the courage to stop that day, to make that proposal, to risk everything on an impossible bet that paid infinite dividends in love and happiness. And Beatrice, looking back through the years, saw clearly that every step of that painful journey, every closed door, every humiliation suffered, every moment of absolute despair, everything had been necessary to bring her exactly where she belonged. To that ranch, to that man, to that life she hadn't dared imagine even in her wildest dreams. The road continued beyond the gates of Sterling Ranch, winding through the countryside, taking other travelers to unknown destinations. But for Beatrice, that road ended at that iron gate. It ended the moment a man with sad eyes and a broken heart asked the question that would change everything. "Do you want to be my wife?" And she, with a daughter in her arms and nothing to lose, said yes. The best yes of her entire life. The yes that saved not only her and Alice, but also Vincent, bringing everyone back from the edge of the abyss into the light of hope, love, and true family. The stars continued shining indifferently over the sleeping ranch. But inside that house, in the hearts of the people who inhabited it, shone an even stronger light. The light of love conquered through trials, of family chosen with the heart, of a second chance embraced with gratitude, of life rebuilt on hope when everything seemed lost. And on that quiet night, As Vincent and Beatrice finally went inside to sleep in each other's arms, Sterling Ranch rested in peace, a silent witness that miracles happen, that true love can be born in the most unlikely places, and that sometimes, just sometimes, happy endings are real for those brave enough to believe and fight for them.